The Field of 68 Media Network presents Red is the New Orange, a Syracuse basketball podcast.
Vince intercepts a pass, breakaway for the freshman guard, he flies and slams! Aerial assault from Judah Mintz.
Looking to go back door to Bell, they get it to a near corner three, knocks it down! Chris Bell, the sharpshooter.
Bringing you everything you need to know out of the 315.
Up top, Williams surges ahead, up with the right hand and in. A pretty up and under move from Benny Williams to beat his man.
Over to Taylor, he skips into the lane, puts up a floater, it drops in.
Let's get it started with your host, Ian Unsworth and Johnny Gadamowitz.
Well, if you stayed up late to watch Syracuse and Stanford, we are sorry. This is Red is the New Orange. Ian Unsworth, Johnny Gadamowitz. In the best interests of objective journalism, we will pull no punches today. And we will be very plain and very truthful about what we watched or maybe didn't watch when Syracuse went to the Farm and lost 70-61 to the Cardinal. Follow us on Twitter, F68_Cuse. Give us a listen, give us a like wherever you watch and wherever you consume this podcast, whether it be on YouTube or Apple, Spotify, Megaphone. You know where to find us at this point. I mean, we've been doing it for almost 2 years. So thank you for sticking with us, and thank you for honestly suffering through some bad Syracuse basketball at midnight.
We're all in it together. In it together.
That's the one good thing we can say. We all trudged through this season as Syracuse is continuing to just take plunge after plunge. Now 9-12 on the season, 3-7 in conference play. That is not nice. The game tipped at 11 o'clock on Wednesday. It was the latest game to start in the entire college basketball slate. Santa Clara tipped on ESPNU at 9, and Syracuse followed at 11. I just don't know how I feel about that, first of all, Johnny. Second of all, you wait all night for Syracuse. And let me just say that I didn't, because I caught the flu. Tuesday, I said I was losing my voice. Wednesday, I caught the flu. It felt like I got hit by a semi-truck. And Johnny, I told you, look, I'm just going to watch the game in the morning. It's not worth staying up this late. Let me get better.
Right decision by you, by the way.
I went to bed. I was like, all right, let me check the score. And I had about 25 text messages in my phone about Syracuse. And none of them were good. Most of them were Syracuse, WTF, Syracuse, LOL, mostly from non-Syracuse fans who know I went there. And I rolled my eyes immediately and said, "Oh goodness, what happened?"
Here we go again.
And then it was 25-2. That is not the way you want to wake up.
Well, I guess the trade-off, Ian, is that as we look towards tomorrow's matchup against Cal, or Saturday night's matchup against Cal, there's an absolutely loaded day of college basketball tomorrow. So at least we'll get our fix. We'll be able to watch some great, plenty of ranked games and, high major conference games that probably give you the most loaded day at the regular season so far. Whereas earlier this week, you're kind of sitting, you're waiting around, and then sure enough, we had to deal with what was just a disastrous performance on all fronts.
It was abominable. I mean, how bad could you possibly ask for a game to start? No
Not
points
any worse.
in the
I
first.
can't picture a scenario where it's any worse than what it was. And it's a shame because, okay, you had the comeback attempt, and that's cute, and that's all and good that you cut it to single digits. But you lost that game because of how poorly you started that game. If not for that slow of a start, this is a game that gets flipped from a loss into a win. And normally, you can break it down. There's all these reasons. There's all these different factors. For me, that's what it is. It's those first couple of minutes. It's as simple as that. And I know, Ian, that we've been giving Red Autry the benefit of the doubt. I'm of the belief, I know you're of the belief that, we're not going to sit here and say that they need a change. I think it was always going to be at least 3 years. Anything less than that would be viewed as rash. But I'm sorry, when you show up and have a start to a game like that, that is on coaching. That is a preparedness problem. And I know it was past everybody's bedtimes. And I know it was a little bit of a unique scenario considering where it was and the time it was and a new opponent and getting used to all those things. But when you come out that flat, coming off a couple of days where you were, and you brought it up on the last episode, right? They flew out there early. They had ample time. It's not as if they had to deal with airport delays and jet lags and all that. It's disappointing and disheartening to say the least.
Coach Autry said after the game that they watched film and talked about shot selection, excuse me, being patient and moving the ball. There was about none of that in the first 8 minutes. The ball did not move. In fact, it went in the post and then it went to Stanford, quite frankly. I mean, I have not seen a team dribble the ball off its foot more times in one game, one entire game, than I saw Syracuse do it in the first 4 minutes. And
Well,
yes,
I'll
I
interject
did go.
there.
I did go back and I watched the entire game the next morning just because I was in bed and I had nothing else to do.
All right, I will interject. I called the game this week that featured on the women's side of things between Seton Hall and Butler. And the Butler Bulldogs, I'll give them credit. Austin Parkinson, their head coach, he's doing the best he can. They dribbled off their foot more times than I think he would care to admit and the team would care to admit. Neither here nor there, just had to sprinkle that in there.
Okay, well, I mean, this is not like we are not expecting Harborfield's high school to play
Fair enough.
at a D1 level, and these guys are getting paid. You've seen the clips of these coaches talking about it. Like you have to expect them to perform at a high level, and whether it was Red Autry not getting them prepared, Syracuse not something is player wise. The switch, the intensity, the fire was not there, and the attention to detail wasn't there either. We talked about the sets and how sloppy they've been, and how the timing isn't there. That continues. And you face a good team like Stanford, who already has a mismatch problem in Maxime Reynaud, regardless of whether you're playing well or not. It's curtains.
And Reynaud was doing way more than just scoring. We kind of billed him as this bucket. He filled up the stat sheet all over the place. 21 points, double-double, 15 rebounds. Obviously, with his height, nothing that he is not used to. But defensively, a block, 3 steals, couple of dimes too. So he was all over the stat sheet. I think this was also one of those games, Ian, where you don't have to be a maestro to figure out that J.J. Starling wasn't at his best. He was held in check, only 7 points on 3 of 16, 1 of 7 from three-point land. And how many times have we had the conversation, whether it be when J.J. was injured or games like this where he was just sort of a non-factor, that when you don't have JJ at his best, or not even at his best, but you don't have typical JJ Starling. This team just has a real struggle finding other sources, finding other areas of offense, right? You can only ask so much out of Jair Davis and Eddie Lampkin. And look, our Syracuse's leading scorer in this game was Jaquan Carlos, right, with 16 points, who had one of his more efficient nights scoring the basketball that we've seen this season, but just not enough firepower. You combine that with the slow start, and you're going to get the result that the Orange unfortunately got.
Jaquan Carlos and Kyle Cuff were the only 2 people to take the ball to the basket.
And that's why I'm curious Cuff didn't play more, not to cut you off there. He barely played in this basketball game, 8 minutes, on a night where Starling didn't have his stuff, on a night where Carlos was kind of, being that scorer. You needed that extra facilitator out there. And I like what Cuff brings from a defensive standpoint too. I don't know. I thought that was a little puzzling to not see much of him at all, particularly because Elijah Moore barely played either.
Well, size-wise, it's pretty tough to have both Carlos and Cuff on the floor. That makes it very difficult. I mean, it's already tough to rebound against Stanford, but I think that makes it even more difficult when you've got 2 guards that are 6 foot, and that's like being a little generous, 6 foot, going in there to grab rebounds. It's very difficult to do that. On the Reynaud point, I did find it funny that when Syracuse threw the ball to Eddie Lampkin in the post, and they had it on the far block, you couldn't see Eddie Lampkin's head because Reynaud would put his arms up, and all you see is chest, white jersey, head, arms. He's that big, and that overwhelming defensively that Lampkin was not looking to score early on. And then they throw it into Jair Davis, and the 4 perimeter players were, again, stagnant, standing around. I mean, that is how Syracuse has started games all year and gotten in holes like this. Johnny, one more point to really, I think it's worth just thinking about and discussing here. What's the bigger picture look like for Elijah Moore? What are we really doing now at this point in the season? I understand that he can't be a featured star on this team. After the first half of the Tennessee game, when he looked fantastic, right? He was the only person that had an eye for the basket, and he was aggressive when no one else was. When J.J. Starling was injured, 24 points on 12 shots, 3 of 6 from behind the arc. I understand that it's gone downhill from there, right? After that Tennessee game, he scored double digits twice. And then there was a streak of 7 scoreless games. But what is the long-term thought here of having him in the starting lineup than having him play 5 minutes? What's the plan?
It's puzzling, and I think for me, what makes it even more puzzling is that if this season does indeed continue to unravel in the way it has, which let's call it like it is kind of another lost year without a tournament, then the one thing that you would at least want to be able to harp on is the fact that, all right, the future looks bright, right? Your younger players are getting those real game reps, are growing, are getting better, so that in a year or two, if you go out and you dress things in the portal, if you figure out what you need to do going forward to get more results, that at least those freshmen and those sophomores will have gone through those growing pains. Right? How often do we see, the NCAA tournament team that's built on the veterans and the upperclassmen, and when they're asked about it, they reflect back on that freshman and sophomore year when things weren't easy and they had to, build the brand and grow the program. Elijah Moore doesn't fit that bill right now for Syracuse because he's barely playing. If we're not playing our key underclassmen freshmen in a season where, let's be honest, I don't know how much we're really playing for at this point anyway, then what the heck are we doing here? Because at this point, it's about development. And I know in today's day and age of college basketball, you can make the argument, well, who knows where any of these guys are even going to be next year, and roster turnover and retention rate is all at an all-time low. But still, that doesn't mean you just abandon working with what you have and trying to prepare guys for the better, because that's a disservice not just to your team, but the individual as well.
Well, with Elijah Moore's talent and skill, you would think that there would just be a bit more production and more ways to get him involved. And even when he's out there for those 5-6 minute stretches, he's barely seeing the ball, which is also strange. It doesn't look like either he wants the shots or the shots are being made for him. He gets put in awkward spots a lot of times. He only took one shot, and it was kind of a rushed 3 against Stanford. So, I mean, maybe it's a mental thing. Maybe it's not the coaching staff. Maybe he's going through a little funk. But who knows? But when he's playing 5 minutes a game, and then your other star freshman is out, I mean, and at this point, we might as well just call it indefinitely, because there hasn't been any news on Donnie Freeman. And as we know with the Starling injury, if there was good news, we would know by now, right? It feels like the coaching staff has been very forward about that. So I don't know what the future looks like. To say it's bright is not, at least for the players on this team right now, to say the future is bright is got a big old question mark on it. Next year's recruiting class looks great. Period. Full stop. Next year's recruiting class looks great. So from one West Coast team to another, yes, Cal is also in the ACC, folks, and that's who Syracuse has on Saturday. This is a 10 o'clock tip, so maybe you'll be in bed by 12:30, given that all these basketball games seem to run over each other. Chances are Syracuse is actually tipping at 10:12, and they will be done by 12:12 on Sunday morning.
Yeah, what's on ESPN2 right before this one? We got to hope that's a quickie, whatever it is.
All right. Well, let me comb the local listings. Johnny, what are your early thoughts on the Cal Golden Bears of the
Yeah, I
AC?
mean, looking at Cal, their season to date has not been the most inspiring, and that holds true even going back to the non-conference portion of their schedule where they lost to an Ivy League team in Cornell. And then in ACC play, haven't really fared all too much better. Coming off a loss to SMU in Dallas midweek this week. They do have wins over Miami, who, again, I said this last episode, is in the basement of the conference. Took down FSU last week as well. Also do have a win over NC State, but this team is not world beaters. They've been playing a little better as of recently, and heck, their conference record is better than Syracuse's is at 4-6 overall. The one thing that worries me coming at this from an orange angle is that they've been good on their home court, 9-3, as opposed to just 2-6 on the road. So again, like we talked about with Stanford last time out, a lot of these West Coast teams obviously making that transition over to the ACC. It's tough sledding on the road, and they have to come across the country. Not the case here with Cal, who again has been more than okay on their home court. So Orange are going to have to show up ready to go, because if you come back from this West Coast swing 0 for 2, I think many fans were hoping for 2-0, much less 1-1 at the minimum. So we'll see. We'll see. Andrei Stojakovic is the name to know. Towards the top of the conference in scoring, nearly 18 points per game. Not a particularly adept 3-point shooter. Right around 32%.
Yeah,
So
he's not
serviceable.
Peja. Peja
Right.
is his dad, if you recognize the name. But yes, he and his dad might not exactly be the same player. But Andre is pretty darn good, and
He gets
probably
to
a
the line
better
a ton too.
better all he's a better all-around player than his dad is. Um, here's an interesting thing. He started his career at Stanford and then transferred to Cal. I mean, neither of those two schools really take sports all that seriously, but it'd be like starting at Syracuse then transferring to Georgetown. Like, what? Doesn't exactly sound right. But in today's day and age, I don't think either program would bat an eye, because that's how it goes. Didn't play all that much at Stanford last year. Stanford's gone through a coaching change, as you probably heard on the broadcast. But Stojakovic has really opened up his game, and he's seen a ton more of the ball this year. And I think that has helped him a lot when it comes to developing his game. Over the summer, Johnny, he hoops with pros. And they have these Rico Hines open runs in California. And Stojakovic is out there playing against Kevon Looney and Russell Westbrook and Paul George and all these guys that come through these open gyms regularly. So he knows what he's getting himself into.
Taking a peek at his game log here, has missed the last couple of contests
With the flu.
with the flu. Okay. So we'll see what the deal is for him as far as if he's healthy and good to go. Even in the games that he had played before missing the last couple, minutes shrunk down. So maybe something that was sort of coming on and they're figuring to hold him out just to get him back to full strength. But yeah, again, Ian, this is a game that you got to have it. This conference record just kind of continues to spiral for the worse. And I think this will be a J.J. Starling bounce back game. When you have games like this coming off performances like Starling had against Stanford, he knows that there's only so much time left. You can't let a 3-game losing streak turn into a 4-game losing streak, which I believe would be the longest of the season to date if the Orange don't come out on the right side of things here. So expectations are not high by any stretch, but that's not to say the fan base isn't antsy and almost expecting a win.
Yeah, it's a really tough spot to be in if you're Syracuse, because Cal is honestly a pretty solid team, all things considered. People are overlooking them because of the record, but I mean, besides Stojakovic, the Golden Bears have experienced pieces, and they have guys that can get it done. Jovan Blackshear is their point guard. He played at Grand Canyon for a number of years, made a couple of NCAA tournaments there. He was on the team last year that had Tyon Grant Foster and made a nice little run. He's kind of a chucker when it comes to creating his own offense, but for others, he's the assist leader on the team. And And he does a pretty good job overall of controlling the pace of the game. I think it's a 6th year in college. You would kind of hope that he's got it down, but I think he does a good job when I watch him play. If Stojakovic is still out, keep an eye on Jeremiah Wilkinson, freshman from Georgia, who also will let it fly, kind of with reckless abandon sometimes. But he and Stojakovic are the only players on the team who've taken over 200 field goal attempts this season. So looking at the Wilkinson game log here, he was 5 of 17 for 16 points against SMU in their last game. 10 for 22 from the field, 30 points against Miami. That includes a 1 of 10 mark from behind the arc. 6 of 17 against Florida State, 18 points, 2 of 8 from 3. But the Miami game was a win. The Florida State game was a win. So you know what? Even if it's inefficient, it's getting the job done. And that's all you really care about.
He was coming off the bench to start the year, too. Just recently entered the starting lineup over the course of the past couple of games. Still not playing a ton of minutes. He's not really amongst the minutes leaders, per se, on this Cal squad, but he makes the most of the minutes that he does play, in large part, like you say, Ian, just because he is really a high-volume type guy.
Yeah, last thing to keep an eye out for, Matty Sissoko is Cal's starting center. He also didn't play against SMU, and he's not the tallest guy in the world, but he is a physical thumper akin to a Lampkin. And so if those two match up, it'll be kind of like we got against Boston College. I don't think Sissoko is much of a scorer, but you'll get the two traditional bigs thumping against each other, post work, spin move, this, that, and the third. And I'm sure Eddie Lampkin will have his fun and be engaged in the game, but he couldn't get engaged because Reno was running him all over the place and playing pretty solid defense. So hopefully that's an outlet for Syracuse to keep the scoring going as well. It's a 10 o'clock tip in Berkeley, California. And luckily for you Syracuse fans, it's the last one of the year that you'll have to deal with that is really late and hopefully not as miserable as Stanford was on Wednesday. That'll wrap things up for Red is the New Orange. Johnny and Ian signing off. We'll be back next week to run you through what Syracuse has, a bit of a gauntlet coming up. Duke, Wednesday, February the 5th. Oh boy. All right. Well, they got to make it through Cal first.